I never thought I'd have to fight my own brother over my house. But then again, I never imagined he'd be capable of something so downright selfish. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the planner, the saver, the one who did things the right way. And then there was Kevin, my younger brother, charming to a fault, with a smile that could get him out of anything. He had a knack for making people believe he had everything under control, but in reality, he bounced from one scheme to the next, never really getting his life together. After years of scrimping and saving, I finally bought my own house, a charming 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion by any means, but it was mine, and I loved every inch of it. I decorated it with care, choosing every piece of furniture thoughtfully, making it a reflection of me. It was my sanctuary, a place I could truly call home after working so hard to get here. Kevin, of course, was impressed, but in his own way. "Man, you're really living the dream, huh?" he'd say, sprawled across my couch, sipping beer straight from the bottle. He never outright asked to move in, but he spent enough time at my place that he might as well have. And honestly, I didn't mind too much until his business ideas started creeping into our conversations. "You know," he mused one evening, "you could totally rent this place out and make bank. People are always looking for cute places to stay. Airbnb, you know? Passive income, sis." I laughed it off, shaking my head. "Kevin, I bought this place to live in it, not to turn it into a revolving door for strangers." That should have been the end of it, but Kevin was nothing if not persistent. When I told my family about my upcoming 6-month work trip abroad, Kevin was the first to volunteer to help out while I was gone. "I'll keep an eye on things," he offered, all smiles. "Water your plants, collect your mail, make sure nobody tries anything shady." I hesitated. Kevin wasn't exactly known for his reliability, but my parents chimed in almost immediately. "It's a great idea," Mom said a little too enthusiastically. "Kevin's responsible. He's family." Dad nodded. "Better than leaving it empty." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I laid down some ground rules: no parties, no unapproved guests, and definitely no funny business. Kevin promised, hand over heart, that he'd take care of everything. I handed him a spare key and left, feeling like I'd made the right choice. At first, things seemed fine. Kevin sent the occasional text updating me that everything was all good, and even sent a few pictures of my plants thriving under his care. But looking back, I should have known. The messages were too vague, the updates too infrequent. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that Kevin had a completely different plan for my house. To him, it wasn't just a place to stay while I was away, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to make easy money without doing any of the work. It wasn't until I came back early, completely unannounced, that I found out just how far he'd taken things. My flight home landed earlier than planned, and I was exhausted but relieved to be back. I hadn't told Kevin I was coming home ahead of schedule, mostly because I wanted to surprise him and see if he'd actually taken care of my house the way he promised. I rolled my suitcase up the familiar driveway, smiling at the sight of my front porch, picturing a long shower and a quiet night in my own bed. But something was off. There were 2 cars in the driveway, neither of them Kevin's. My heart sank. Maybe he had friends over, I thought, trying to stay optimistic. But as I reached for the doorknob, I realized it. The lock had been changed. Panic bubbled up in my chest. Fumbling through my bag, I pulled out my key and tried it anyway. It didn't fit. What the hell? Before I could process, the door swung open, and a woman I had never seen before stood there, looking at me with confusion. She held a toddler on her hip, and behind her, I saw suitcases, travel bags, and a man lounging on my couch. Can I help you?" she asked, shifting uncomfortably. I stared at her, speechless. This is my house?" I stammered, blinking rapidly as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman frowned. "No, I think you're mistaken. We booked this place on Airbnb for the month." She laughed nervously, holding up her phone to show me the confirmation. "See?" My stomach dropped as I read the listing: my living room, my furniture, all neatly presented under a cheery headline: Cozy Suburban Getaway, Entire Home. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. "Where's Kevin?" I asked, my voice shaking. The woman shrugged. "The host? He said he had to run some errands, but told us to let ourselves in." I turned on my heel, my hands shaking as I dialed Kevin's number. It rang twice before he answered, his voice casual. "Yo, sis. What's up?" "Kevin!" I hissed through clenched teeth. "What the hell is going on? I'm standing in my house and there are strangers living here." There was a long pause before he chuckled. "Oh, yeah, about that. Look, it's not a big deal. It's just a little side hustle I set up. I mean, you weren't using the place anyway, right? It's like a victimless crime." I felt the rage boil over. "You rented out my house? Without my permission? Are you insane?" "Relax," he said, as if I was the unreasonable one. "You should actually be thanking me. I made a killing. Do you know how much people are willing to pay for a fully furnished home like yours? A few grand easy, and I made sure they left it nice and tidy." I could barely breathe. "Kevin, get here, now!" He sighed dramatically. All right, I'm on my way." Hanging up, I turned back to the bewildered family still standing in my doorway. I felt mortified. "I'm so sorry," I muttered. I didn't know about this." The woman pursed her lips. "Look, I'm sorry if there's been a misunderstanding, but we paid good money for this place. We can't just leave without a refund." I nodded numbly. "I understand. Let me figure this out." Standing there in my own home, now occupied by strangers, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. Kevin had betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. He had turned my sanctuary into his personal cash cow, and I had no idea how much damage he'd done. And worst of all, he didn't even think it was a big deal. I stood in my own living room, feeling like a stranger in the very space I had worked so hard to create. The guests sat awkwardly on my couch while I paced the floor, my thoughts running a mile a minute. My hands were shaking, and I could feel the heat rising to my face as Kevin strolled in half an hour later, completely unbothered, grinning like this was some kind of funny mix-up. "Hey, sis," he greeted, as if I hadn't just discovered his grand betrayal. I spun to face him, barely able to contain myself. "Kevin, what the hell were you thinking? You rented out my house like it was yours to do whatever you wanted with." He had the audacity to shrug. "Look, I get you're upset, but hear me out. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. I mean, you were gone. The house was just sitting here collecting dust. What's the harm?" "The harm?" My voice cracked with fury. "I don't even know who has been in my house, Kevin. My home. What if they stole something? What if they trashed the place? Do you even think about consequences before you act?" Kevin leaned against the wall, crossing his arms, his smirk still firmly in place. "Relax. I screened everyone, got them through the Airbnb process and everything. It's all good. No harm, no foul." I felt like I could explode. "You changed my locks, Kevin." He had the nerve to roll his eyes. "Come on, I had to. Can't have randoms walking in whenever they please." I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to process the sheer absurdity of it all. "Do you even hear yourself? You didn't think to ask me first? I trusted you to take care of my place, not turn it into a freaking rental property." "Well," he drawled, "technically it is an asset, and I just maximized it." I wanted to scream, "Where is the money, Kevin?" And just like that, his smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before returning. "It's handled." "Handled? No, Kevin. Where is the money?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, so I might have spent some of it." I inhaled sharply, feeling like I might combust. "On what?" "Just, stuff. Bills, a few upgrades for my place, some investments," he said, waving his hand like it was no big deal. "You always said I should think about the future." I was speechless. "So let me get this straight. You rented out my house behind my back, kept the money, And now it's gone? He had the decency to at least look a little sheepish. Not all of it. There's still a bit left. Oh, how generous of you, I spat. Well, guess what? You're going to pay me back, Kevin. Every last cent. Kevin snorted. Come on, don't be so dramatic. You're doing fine. You make good money, and it's not like I wrecked the place. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinets. Half of my dishes were missing. The living room couch had a stain I hadn't seen before. I felt sick. I'm done, I said, my voice cold. You need to get out, now. Kevin's face dropped. Whoa, wait, you're kicking me out? Over this? You're really gonna make me homeless over a little side hustle? I laughed bitterly. Homeless? Kevin, you have your own place. You just don't want to go back to it because it's a dump. He looked genuinely offended. Wow, thanks for the support, sis. You lost any right to my support when you betrayed me, I shot back. Get your stuff and get out. Kevin sighed dramatically, muttering under his breath as he grabbed his things. You know, you're really overreacting. If you weren't such a control freak, you'd see the potential here. I ignored him, focusing instead on pulling up the Airbnb app. Sure enough, my house had multiple reviews, some glowing, some not so much. One reviewer even mentioned how the host had been super chill about letting us throw a little get-together. My blood boiled. Once Kevin was finally out, I started damage control. I reached out to Airbnb's support team and explained the situation, sending them a copy of the deed proving the house was mine and not Kevin's to rent. They were surprisingly cooperative and took the listing down immediately. Next, I called my parents. Predictably, they took Kevin's side. He was just trying to help, Mom said in that exasperated tone she always used when I complained about Kevin's behavior. Dad chimed in with, "You're being too hard on him. He's your brother, and family helps family." I nearly laughed at the irony. Funny how that only seems to apply when Kevin screws up. Their silence told me everything I needed to know. Over the next week, I painstakingly went through my house, cataloging every little thing Kevin had touched. Some of my furniture had small damages. My guest towels were completely gone, and my pantry was half empty. When I confronted Kevin with a list of costs, he balked. "You're seriously charging me for this?" he whined. "I didn't steal anything. I just repurposed it." I stared at him, barely holding back my anger. "You have two choices. Pay me back, or I take legal action." Kevin rolled his eyes. "Geez, lighten up. I'll figure something out." Weeks passed, and I saw no sign of him figuring it out. I sent him reminders, but he either ignored them or gave me half-hearted promises that he was working on it. I'd had enough. I went straight to a lawyer and had an official eviction notice drawn up, barring him from even setting foot on my property again. When he received it, his reaction was priceless, his cocky demeanor finally cracking. "You're seriously doing this?" he asked, wide-eyed. "Damn right I am," I replied. "And if you don't pay me back, I'll see you in small claims court." Kevin's expression soured. "You're ruining my life over this." "No, Kevin, you ruined your own life." For the first time in a long time, I saw something resembling regret flash across his face. But it was too late. I was done being the responsible one cleaning up his mess. I wasn't one for dramatic confrontations, but this time, Kevin left me no choice. After weeks of dodging my calls and ignoring my repayment demands, I decided to take things into my own hands. If he thought he could get away with stealing from me and walking around like he'd done nothing wrong, he had another thing coming. The perfect opportunity presented itself when Mom invited me to a family dinner at her house. She insisted I come, despite my protests. "Kevin will be there," she said in that hopeful tone, as if the magic of meatloaf and mashed potatoes would somehow fix the damage he'd done. Fine. If she wanted me there, she'd get me, along with all the evidence of Kevin's little side hustle. I arrived right on time, dressed sharper than usual, my laptop tucked under my arm. Kevin, of course, was already there, lounging on the couch with a beer in hand like he didn't have a care in the world. "Hey, sis," he greeted, flashing me that smug grin. "Glad you could make it." I smiled back, but it wasn't the kind of smile he was used to. "Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world." Dinner started off with small talk, my parents pretending like nothing was wrong. Mom beamed at Kevin, asking about his projects, while Dad chuckled at his latest nonsense story about his networking opportunities. I waited patiently, letting them dig their little hole deeper. And then, just as Mom was clearing the plates, I dropped the bombshell. "So, Kevin," I said sweetly, setting my laptop on the table and turning it around to face him. "Care to explain why my house was listed on Airbnb for 6 months without my permission?" The room fell silent. Kevin's face paled, his grin faltering for the first time in a long while. What are you talking about?" he stammered. I tapped the screen, pulling up the Airbnb listing I had archived before it was taken down. "I mean this," I said, pointing at the glowing reviews from complete strangers who had stayed in my house while I was away. "You even had the nerve to call yourself the host," Mom gasped. "Kevin, is this true?" He scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "It's not a big deal, okay? I was just using the space efficiently." I laughed, actually laughed. "Efficiently? You changed my locks, trashed my house, pocketed the money, and didn't even tell me. Do you know how much damage you caused? The broken coffee table, the missing linens, the wine stains. Oh, and let's not forget the time someone threw a party." Kevin's jaw tightened. I was gonna tell you eventually." Dad, who had been quiet until now, cleared his throat. "Kevin, how could you do something like that to your sister?" Kevin turned defensive as always. "Come on, it's not like she was using the place. She's making a huge deal out of nothing. It's not like I didn't take care of it." I didn't hold back anymore. "You took care of it? Kevin, I had to kick out strangers when I came home. I had to spend thousands fixing what they ruined. And now, thanks to you, I might have legal trouble with Airbnb and the city for unregistered rentals." Mom looked between us, wringing her hands. "Oh, honey, I'm sure Kevin didn't mean any harm." I turned to her, voice firm. "No, Mom. Stop making excuses for him. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I have the receipts to prove it." I pulled up my second set of evidence, the bank transfers. "See this? He deposited thousands into his account, not a single dime to me. Kevin, you owe me over 10 grand. Kevin's face was beet red now. I don't have that kind of money." I smiled, cold and sharp. "Well, that's too bad because I've already spoken to my lawyer. If you don't pay me back, I'll be taking legal action." Mom looked horrified. "You wouldn't do that, would you?" I turned to her, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Watch me." Kevin stood up, knocking his chair back. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I stood too, towering over him with every bit of fury I had kept bottled up. "You stole from me, Kevin. You violated my trust, and now you're going to face the consequences." Dad, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, looked at Kevin with disappointment. "You need to fix this, son." Kevin clenched his jaw, avoiding my gaze. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll figure something out." "No," I snapped. "You'll do it now. I want a payment plan by the end of the week, or I go to court." With that, I grabbed my laptop and turned on my heel, walking out with my head high. Kevin's muttered curses followed me, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. By the time I got home, I had a text from him. "Fine. I'll pay you back. Just give me some time." I didn't respond. I had given him enough of my time already. In the days following our explosive family dinner, I waited for Kevin to come through on his promise to pay me back. Predictably, he didn't. A week passed, then 2, and every message I sent was met with excuses. "I'm working on it," or "Things are tight right now. Give me a little more time." I wasn't surprised. This was Kevin's pattern stall, deflect, and hope that people would forget or forgive. But I wasn't falling for it this time. I had spent too many years cleaning up after him, too many moments letting him off the hook because he was family. So I did what I said I would. I filed a small claims case against him. It wasn't a grand lawsuit, just enough to show him I was serious. When he got served, I got a frantic call. "Are you seriously suing me, your own brother?" he yelled, his voice dripping with disbelief. I stayed calm, the way I had practiced in my head a dozen times. "Yes, Kevin. I gave you every chance to do the right thing, and you didn't. So now we're doing it my way." His response was predictable. "You're ruining my life over a few bucks." I laughed humorlessly. "A few bucks? Kevin, you made thousands off my house and didn't even think to pay me a dime. You changed my locks. You trashed my place. You ruined things, not me." He hung up, but I knew I had finally gotten through to him. A few days later, a partial payment landed in my account, only a fraction of what he owed, but it was a start. Slowly, over the next couple of months, he chipped away at the debt in installments, no doubt resenting every dollar he had to part with. Our parents, of course, weren't thrilled with how things turned out. Mom called me a few times, her voice heavy with guilt-tripping concern. "You know, Kevin's really trying, sweetheart. Maybe you could ease up a little." I refused to budge. "Mom, if you want to bail him out, go ahead, but I'm not letting this slide." Dad, on the other hand, stayed out of it for the most part, though I caught the occasional disapproving glance at family gatherings. Kevin avoided me like the plague, which, honestly, was an improvement over his usual mooching presence. As time passed, I slowly reclaimed my space, fixing what had been broken, deep cleaning what had been used, and replacing the items that had mysteriously disappeared. It wasn't just about restoring my home, it was about restoring my peace. And somewhere along the way, I realized something. I wasn't just angry at Kevin for what he did to my house. I was angry at myself for letting him take advantage of me for so long, for always stepping up when he stumbled, for always being the responsible one while he got away with being reckless. I learned to say no, not just to him, but to the idea that I owed anyone anything just because we shared blood. Kevin eventually paid off his debt, though our relationship was never the same after that. I'd see him at family events, and we'd exchange polite small talk, but the trust was gone. And honestly, I was okay with that. One afternoon, while I was rearranging the living room, finally making it feel like mine again, Kevin sent me a text. No hard feelings, right? I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Take care of yourself, Kevin." That was the last time we really spoke. Looking back, I wouldn't say I regret how things played out. It was painful, yes, but it was also necessary. I had worked too hard to let someone else, even family, walk all over me. And if Kevin learned anything from it, well, that was on him. A year later, my house finally felt like home again. The scars of Kevin's betrayal, both physical and emotional, had faded, replaced by a newfound sense of strength. I'd repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and even planted a small garden in the backyard. Every change was a quiet declaration, "This is mine." Kevin and I barely spoke now, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Occasionally, I'd hear from mutual friends that he was working on himself, but I didn't hold my breath. I had moved on, focusing on my career, my friends, and the peace I had reclaimed. One afternoon, I received an Airbnb notification on my phone. My heart skipped a beat before I realized it was just an advertisement. I smiled to myself and deleted it. Never again. As I sat on my porch, sipping my coffee and watching the sunset, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. Lesson learned, boundaries set, and life, it was better than ever.